So after a few years of waiting, it's finally time to return to Nevermore Academy with Wednesday Season 2, the hotly anticipated continuation of one of Netflix's biggest shows that had a ton of pressure on it and a lot to live up to in more ways than one. The first season really exploded onto the scene in 2022, so much that I think it caught everyone a little off guard. It had higher viewership than Stranger Things, lifted the Addams Family IP out of irrelevancy, made Jenna Ortega an instant household name, started its own dance craze. It was kind of inescapable. The show really dominated pop culture for a while in a way that I couldn't remember seeing probably since Game of Thrones ended. So naturally, there was a lot riding on season 2 to deliver the goods and keep that momentum going. Not an easy task. Catching lightning in a bottle once is a tall order, let alone twice. And did they pull it off? Well, they did and they didn't. It's complicated. First of all, I think Netflix really shot the show in the foot with the release window. I mean, how do you not release it during Halloween season? It's such a no-brainer, but whatever, that's beside the point. With most of their original shows, Netflix likes to drop new seasons all at once. But with this season, they broke it up into 2 parts. Normally, I'd be in favor of this because I'm really not a fan of the full season drop formula. A new season debuts, people binge it, and it's forgotten within a week. Hard pass. I want to return to the 1 episode a week format, but dropping it in 2 parts is an improvement. Or at least it should have been. See, unlike the first season, Wednesday Season 2 doesn't blast out of the gate. The show has gone through some changes, both creatively and in the cast, so it's a new version of the show we're dealing with now, and it takes a while to figure itself out again. Frankly, it takes too long, because just about everything that makes the season come together and ultimately work happens in Part 2. Part 1 is where we get all the growing pains, where the writers experimented with some new things that didn't really work so well. Pugsley! And coming off the pop culture phenomenon that was season 1, that was a pretty jarring speed bump. And then we had to wait a whole month for them to drop part 2 and right the ship. But by then a lot of the damage was done. In the weeks before part 2 dropped, I wasn't really seeing anyone talk about the show online, which was weird after season 1 was so huge, but it kind of makes sense when you look back. Because if you think about it, season 1 wasn't really that complex. Sure, it was fun and witty, it had a good cast, it was well made, but I wouldn't say the writing was much more sophisticated than your typical teen mystery series. This one just happened to have Tim Burton in the director's chair and a really captivating lead actress at the center of it. In my opinion, the success of season 1 was mainly because of 3 things: the fun Tim Burton visual aesthetic, the star-making performance from Jenna Ortega, and the Wednesday dance going mega viral. And I mean so mega viral that even people who didn't care about the show probably saw Lady Frickin' Gaga doing the Wednesday dance on TikTok and were like, oh, I have to see what this is about now. And I'm sure there were other reasons too, but for my money, those were the main ones. Well, those and all the shippers wanting Wednesday and Enid to be outcasts in a much different way. Take that stuff away, and suddenly the show feels a lot less special. That all being said, I think Wednesday was already on shaky footing to begin with, enough that it wouldn't take too much for the cracks to start showing. And season 2 could have picked up where season 1 left off without missing a beat if it had gone from strength to strength. But that's not what happened. For starters, the cast shakeups really flipped over a lot of tables here. Some characters from season 1 are gone, there's a lot of new ones, and I think most of the new characters are pretty cool, it just takes too long for the show to figure out how to use them. I spent part 1 wondering what most of them were even doing there. Also, the rest of the Addamses are basically regular characters now, so it's not really a Wednesday show anymore, it's an Addams Family show. But you sold us on this being a Wednesday show. I don't hate the other Addamses, Pugsley notwithstanding, but they're not what I'm here for. You just changed the whole dynamic of the series here, and from what I've seen, some fans aren't happy about that, and I can understand why. After season 1, the only Addams I really needed to see more of was Fester. The others were good with the amount of screen time they had. Morticia's really cool, Catherine Zeta-Jones is awesome in the role, I just think you don't need too much of a good thing. Gomez is fine, he's likable enough, I just don't find him terribly compelling, and Pugsley, let's just say the show doesn't do him any favors. In season 1, they were around, they mattered in the story, they just weren't the focus of it when they didn't need to be. Now we're getting a lot more of all of them, plus the grandma, and all the Nevermore side characters and villains, which there are a lot more of now too, which means there's less focus on Wednesday, and turns out that when you take the focus off of Wednesday, the show gets clunkier. So what we have in season 2 is a whole bunch of new supporting characters and larger roles for the ones we already had, most of whom are getting their own stories, some of which are plot relevant and some of which aren't. And what we learn pretty quickly is that if these stories don't somehow tie back to Wednesday or the A-plot of the season, then it just kind of feels like treading water. And the really tricky part is that there are so many stories and characters now, it's not even clear what the A-plot is or which of these stories are going to factor into it. So the writers spend a lot of time on a lot of different things, but we don't know which of those things are going to be important until the last couple episodes, and by then, we've already spent most of the season not caring about them. Meanwhile, some of the things that we're made to think are important that we do care about early on turn out to be kind of a misdirect. Gwendolyn Christie is reaching out from beyond the grave to make psychic contact with Wednesday, but that noise. Let's check in on Enid's plank of wood new beau who has a secret girlfriend back home that he never broke up with. Wednesday has a psychic vision of Enid dying and the death being her fault, but I'm supposed to give a shit when you cut over to Pugsley keeping a pet zombie locked up in the tool shed? But then, oh wait, Enid dying was a quasi-red herring and now we have to worry about Pugsley because the zombie is the important thing. After I just spent most of the season wishing they would drop the zombie plot. And Pugsley too, for that matter. Do you see what I mean? The writing just feels very scatterbrained in part 1, with the plot and the characters going in too many different directions. Part 2 eventually rectifies this by finally tying all this stuff together and showing us why it matters so we don't have to focus on a million different things at once. It just takes too long to do it, and they probably lost some people before that happened. In my opinion, the switch flips in episode 6. That's when the monkey wrench that's been screwing things up gets removed and the show starts firing on all cylinders again. Up until then, something just felt off. But episode 6 is a very fun Freaky Friday themed episode that's all about the Wednesday Enid story where the two of them switch bodies. So you've got Jenna Ortega playing Enid in Wednesday's body and Emma Myers playing Wednesday in Enid's body. And this is the type of thing that wouldn't work if the actors didn't commit to it, but they both really nailed this and looked like they were having a blast doing it. It's the best episode of the season. It's also the episode where they sort out the drama between these two, because Wednesday thinks something bad is going to happen to Enid. She's trying to protect Enid but doesn't tell her about it, so Enid misinterprets this and there's all this tension and there's another character coming between them and blah blah blah. And I saw what the writers were going for with this story, but it bothered me. I'm not saying you shouldn't have character tension, you should, but this may have been the wrong way to do it. For me, the Wednesday Enid friendship is one of the core things that make the show work. If you mess with that formula, it throws everything else out of whack. Season 1 was pretty straightforward. Wednesday and Enid didn't always get along, but they had each other's backs. Now the writers are trying to rejigger things and put them at odds and throw new characters in there with them. It's like I'm in a restaurant, I ordered a steak, and you brought me a veggie burger. Season 1 got it right with these two, and it didn't try to overcomplicate things because it had a more singular vision. Season 2 has a lot more balls in the air, so not everything gets the attention it needs. And even when it does, that stuff sometimes still gets glossed over. Like Season 1 had this subplot about Bianca's mom being in a cult that happened almost entirely off-screen, and despite getting a lot more time, happens almost entirely off-screen this season as well, up until the episode where it has to tie into something important happening at the school. Meanwhile, you've got the Pugsley story. That takes too long to go anywhere, and this is when the season drags, because the writers aren't shy about reminding us in every other scene that Pugsley is dumb as a bag of doorknobs, and that even certain members of his own family think he's kind of a waste of space. So yeah, by all means, let's spend a lot of time on his subplot, the whole point of which isn't even made clear until near the end of the season. What could go wrong, right?
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. and let's see if it pays off for him.
This is the kind of stuff that happens when you take too much of the focus off of Wednesday. Season 1 was simple, but it was focused. Season 2 is tripped up because the writers had too many ideas and were trying to do so much that they took their eye off the ball. Not only with the new stuff they introduced this season, but also with things they established previously. Like, Tyler does something here that really seemed to contradict what we learned about Hydes in Season 1. As I understood it, what he does shouldn't have been possible, so that was strange. Also, it's become really obvious now that the writers are basically just doing X-Men here. And in hindsight, I guess that was a thing in Season 1 as well, but it was a little more subtle back then. Now, it's really hard to ignore. Nevermore is the Xavier School, every outcast has a mutant power. There's even a particular storyline that feels like it was lifted right out of Grant Morrison's new X-Men run. And hey, if you're gonna take cues from comics, there are much worse books to do that with, but the similarities were really piling up here. I'm not even gonna say this was a bad thing, but I did notice it. And now the show doesn't feel quite so original anymore. Some of these ideas end up working out in the end, though. The Wednesday-Tyler dynamic gets a new wrinkle that makes it really twisted and compelling. Enid ends the season in a really interesting place. I think most of the cast changes were for the better, again, once the writers figured them out, except the Pugsley stuff. That shit just never worked. But they got rid of that boring emo douchebag Xavier because I think the actor got himself in trouble. So Wednesday's not in a love triangle anymore. That's good. They addressed a long-standing mystery about Thing. That was pretty cool. Even though I haven't forgiven Thing for what he did to me last time. He's great in the show, but Thing is a sawed-off little punk, and I hate him. Hey, a quarter. Nice try, asshole! And some of the new characters are a lot of fun. Pugsley, not so much, but Steve Buscemi's the new principal. He's always great. There's this new girl following Wednesday around, towing the line between sycophant and stalker. I thought the actress really nailed the character. She seems awkward at first, but by the end of the season, she was fitting right in with Wednesday and Enid. The chemistry really worked. Hell, even Christopher Lloyd showed up in a delightfully kooky role.
Great.
Overall, I think the cast changes make for a more interesting show. It's just that the show doesn't really know what to do with them at first. It takes until part 2 for them to really click into place. Once they do and their stories come together and you see what they're really there for, it starts to work. So thankfully the season does end strong, in large part because by that point they've narrowed the focus down to 2 main plot threads instead of 5 or 6. Another plus is that the writers learned from season 1 and adjusted some things that didn't go over so well last time. I think they realized that the cheesy teen romance isn't what people were tuning in for, so the lame love triangle stuff is done. Yes, Enid has one now, sort of, but that makes way more sense for her than Wednesday, and it's dialed back enough that it doesn't take up much time. That makes a big difference. They didn't adjust everything that needed it, though. One of my issues with season 1 is that the finale was a little anticlimactic. They wrote themselves into a corner, they didn't know how to get out of it, so they just took a shortcut. Wednesday's dying, so this ghost just magically appears and heals her mortal injuries. Wow, that's convenient. And they kind of do the same thing here. Wednesday has a vision of a bad thing happening, and it's never really clear what specifically she does that changes it. It's just changed because the plot says so. But how does Wednesday know that her trying to change it won't be what inadvertently causes the vision to happen? She never considers that, and it just doesn't come up. So when she prevents the bad thing in her vision, it just feels too easy somehow because we don't really know how she prevented it. I think the writers need to be a little smarter with how they use Wednesday's psychic visions. They're starting to feel too plot device-esque. Don't know how to get a story moving? Wednesday has a vision. Boom, there you go. We don't really know how her powers work. There's no rhyme or reason to them. It's just whatever the story needs them to do is what they do. The good news is, with the way the season ends, that might be about to change. I'm not going to give them too much credit yet, but they're setting up something that could make better use of these visions beyond just something that the writers whip out whenever they don't know how to move the plot along. And moving the plot did seem to be something they were struggling with for a while here because there were so many of them. But episode 6 is where everything begins to tie together, the minor plots start getting wrapped up, you start getting the big picture, and the writers tweak things that weren't going over so well. So the last 3 episodes are really good. I don't know if it made the headache that was the first 5 episodes worth it, but I did enjoy the ending. In fact, there's so much stuff to wrap up here that they basically have 2 big finale episodes. And I don't mean it's a 2-parter, I mean there's one finale addressing the first big plot and a second finale addressing the other big plot. I think that would have worked better if they devoted a whole season to each one, but here we are, with a plot that's kind of zigzagging all over the place as they try to finish every story they'd set up. It's still a good time ultimately, but it does feel like the writers got a little too fancy with all this. Wednesday Season 2 is like assembling a big jigsaw puzzle without the picture on the box that tells you what it's supposed to look like. The best part is towards the end when you finally know where you're going. It looks good when you finish it, but without the picture, getting the pieces to fit takes too long, and it's frustrating when it should be fun. There's still a lot of good stuff in there though. The show still looks great. You can always tell when Tim Burton's directing. He's got that signature touch that only he can bring to this. Like there's a stop motion puppet sequence at one point. That was super cool. I like a lot of the new characters, even if there were some growing pains before they felt like they fit in. The story is interesting once they get to the point of it, though that does take too long. And I like where the season ended. I just thought they fumbled the ball getting there. If you dropped Season 2 after Part 1, I don't really blame you. They definitely made some mistakes with it. Personally, I was glad I stuck around for Part 2, and I don't dislike the season in hindsight, but it is flawed, and I don't think I'll be rewatching much of it outside of the last 3 episodes. Still looking forward to Season 3, though, so fingers crossed, hopefully Season 2 was just a bump in the road. That's all I've got for now. Thanks so much for watching. While you're here, ding that bell icon and follow all of my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. The links are down there. And YouTube has made it a lot harder to get traction on these videos. Engagement doesn't count anymore unless you're interactive. So if you want to support the channel, it's more important than ever to hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you're still subscribed because people are being unsubbed without their knowledge all the time. YouTube really likes to with me like that. So do all that stuff. I'll be back with more soon. Take care, stay tuned. I'll see you next time.